So this video we'll talk about how we can use some array functions. They're actually called methods, which you'll learn later on, to do work with the array, how to manipulate it, how to change the size, how to add elements, how to delete elements, how to sort elements. So let's go ahead. I've created a brand new file. This is the file we used from a previous video, and it's array practice, and it's just the basics of HTML. And then inside this script statement, let's go ahead and create an array. And we're going to have an array of names. So I'll call it AS names, and I need to make it an array. So you say equals square bracket, square bracket. That is now an array, but there's no elements or positions to store data yet. And if you knew the positions, you could go ahead and do that and just add values. But there's another way that we could do that. So let's create another variable. We'll call it iCount, and another variable called inumNames. Now this variable, inumNames, will keep track of how many names the user wants to enter, and this variable, iCount, will be used as the counter inside of a for loop. So let's go ahead and get data from the user. We already know we could say inumNames equals prompt how many names to enter. And we know that that's going to come back as a string, so we need to make sure that we convert that string to an int by saying parse int. And then let's say if inumNames is greater than 0, meaning they typed in a value, we want to actually enter some names. Let's go ahead and do that. Now this is just an error checker. Didn't have to do that, but I like to be a little more efficient. So let's do a for loop, and we'll set our variable iCount equal to 0. We'll start as 0. And then we'll say as long as iCount is less than the number of names they said they want to enter, we'll do the loop. And then we'll go ahead and increment iCount afterwards. And now inside the loop, we want to go get the name from the user and add it to the array. Now we could go ahead and do something like this. We could say AS names bracket iCount equals prompt enter name number, and let's concatenate on, and we're going to do this. We're going to say iCount plus 1, and be aware that will not change the value of iCount. But it will say, what's the value of iCount the first time? 0. Let's go ahead and add 1 to it. So this will say enter name number 1. It will increment iCount. It will go to 1. And then we'll say enter name number 2. So be aware this does not change our counter at all. We just took the value of our variable we use as our counter, and we added 1 to that value for display purposes. So this would grab a name and stick it in position 0 of the array. And that would work. But another thing we could do is this. We could say anames dot push parenthesis. And what this push does is it says add a new element to the end of the array. And whatever they type in for the name that gets returned from the prompt, that's what we're going to store. We could have broken that up a little bit more. We could have said sname here. And then right here we could have said sname equals, and let's go ahead and pull this prompt out of there. And sorry, I had a little typo. So that says we have a variable called sname. Go get the data from the keyboard. Make sure we have a semicolon there. And then let's push sname to the array. So that will add a brand new element to the array. And it will do it for the number of names we wanted to do. Let's do this too. Once we load up all the elements of the array, let's go ahead and print them out. And so we're just going to say right here, let's do an alert of the name, case matters. So make sure you understand this. So after we load up the array, by pushing a new element for every name they gave us, that increases the size of the array. Then we'll say, let's go ahead and access the loop again, starting at 0. And let's do asNames.length. Now I couldn't use asNames.length up here because we didn't know the length yet. There was no length to the array. But once this is over, now it has a length because we kept adding elements. We kept adding an element to the end, add an element to the end, add an element to the end. And here it says, as long as the count is less than the number of elements in the array, go print it off. So let's try to run that and see what happens. So how many names to enter? Let's go with 3 names. First name, Mickey. Second name, Minnie. Third name, Donald. Prints off Mickey, Minnie, and Donald. So this push allows us to add an element to the end of the array. Well, what if we did this? Let's do this again. Let's we'll have another variable, var I remove POS. And that's going to store the position of which array element we want to get rid of. And what we can now do is we can pop elements off. We'll come to that variable in just a minute. So let's just come right here and let's go to the array dot pop. And then let's copy this loop, which prints off our array, and let's try it again. So this one is used for loading the array. We add a new element to the end of the array for every element they want to do. We print it all off. We then say, let's delete the last element from the array and print off all the arrays again. And let's see if it actually changes the length and that it works. So let's save that. And let's go try to run that and see what happens. So the first one says how many names? We'll say 3. We'll go Mickey, Minnie, Donald. Mickey, Minnie, Donald. There's the array. Now we pop the last element, who is the last element of the array, which should be Donald. So we print off Mickey, Minnie, and that's all there is in the array. So push adds an element to the end of the array. Pop removes an element from the end of the array. So let's try this again. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the pop code and let's try a different piece of code. We'll go ahead and leave this code which loads up the whole array. And let's learn what else we could do. Remember, push says add it to the end. Pop says remove the element that's in the end. But what if we wanted to add an element to the beginning of the array and shift everybody down the line? So let's see what we could do. Let's go ahead and have the array name, which is asNames, bracket, and there's another function, / method, called Unshift. Unshift. And let's add Goofy. And then let's use this loop and print off all the elements of the array again after we added Goofy. And let's see what the Unshift does for us. So let's run this one more time. We want 3 names. Mickey, Minnie, Donald. Remember we took the pop out. So there's Mickey, Minnie, and Donald. That's our array. Then we said Unshift. Remember back over here we said Unshift Goofy. So let's see what the array does now. First element is now Goofy. Then Mickey, then Minnie, then Donald. So in other words, what the Unshift does for us is it adds a new element to the array. But it doesn't push it to the end of the array. It adds it at the beginning of the array and makes everybody else move down, and it increases the length of the array. So let's try something else. After we've added, here's where we add all the elements to the array, we print them all out. Instead of doing an unshift, let's just say we want to do a shift. And we'll just say shift, and you don't put anything in there. You just say shift. And let's see what happens. Let's go save that, and let's run it one more time. How many elements? 3 names. Mickey, Minnie, Donald. There's element 1, 2, and 3, right? Now we're going to shift and print off the array again. So let's see what happens. Minnie is the first element now. Donald is the second element, and that's all there is. So the shift will actually say get rid of the first element of the array. Unshift says add an element at the beginning of the array. Shift says delete an element at the beginning of the array. So push adds to the end, pop deletes from the end. Unshift adds at the beginning, shift says delete from the beginning.